Netanyahu is battling not just in Gaza, but also for his personal life. On a quiet street in Jerusalem, close to a sushi joint, a wine bar, and a bomb shelter, lives Benjamin Netanyahu. The Israeli Prime Minister spends most of his time away from home, dividing his time between the Knesset and the Akiria, also known as the campus, a location in Tel Aviv where the military is headquartered. As the war against Hamas continues into its third month, his childhood nickname, Bibi, which he still uses today, helped him win 6 elections. He has served as Prime Minister for a total of 16 years and hopes to keep going for a long time to come. Throughout his tenure as Israel's leader, Mr. Netanyahu, who is 74 years old, has never had greater power. He is the one who will determine the intensity with which Israel launches its next offensive into Gaza. He is a former Special Forces soldier. The decision to terminate the operation will be made by him. And if he makes it through the post alive, he gets to choose the terms of the day after the war. Director of the Britain-Israel Communications and Research Center Richard Pater says, he's in control. Taking your hands off the wheel is the worst thing you can do in politics, as he is well aware. From the armed wing of Hamas, which numbers 30,000 strong, Israel asserts that it has eliminated 5,000 of them thus far. On the other hand, the operation's top brass from October 7th are still with us. The Palestinian death toll is now at a staggering 18,000, according to the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza. Meanwhile, global pressure is rising over this issue. The level of pressure in national politics will determine how much Mr. Netanyahu listens to the increasing demands of its closest ally, the United States, and Britain to refrain from killing civilians. The coalition that Mr. Netanyahu had formed to become Prime Minister again, a result of a deal with Israel's hard right, was already in disarray before the war even broke out. His corruption trial has lasted for years, and he remains in the middle of it. Protests involving hundreds of thousands of people were staged earlier this year in response to a judicial reform that many believed would grant the government excessive control over the country's highest court. It occurred during his tenure. Many pointed fingers at the incompetence of Mr. Netanyahu's administration when terrorists from Hamas crossed the border on October 7th, killing 1,200 and taking 240 hostages. It's both searing disappointment that he allowed this to happen, and that it happened on his watch, stated Dalia Scanlon, a public opinion expert and political strategist at the Tel Aviv think tank Century Foundation. He should have been the one in charge when this happened. The public's willingness to rally behind the flag is a boon to leaders during times of war. Even though many people still have doubts about Mr. Netanyahu, it seems like most are prepared to set aside their animosity until the worst of the fighting has passed. In order for Hamas to vanish, he must persist, according to 73-year-old fruit vendor Avram Levy of a historic Jerusalem market. We lost if there is even one Hamas member who, while missing a right arm and legs, uses his left hand to make a victory sign. As Mr. Levy put it, Mr. Netanyahu has got the temper of a strong leader. His son, 42 years old, is serving in the military. He remains unbroken. Priority 1, according to many Israelis, is preventing another attack similar to the one on October 7. The Israel Democracy Institute released a poll of 600 people last week, and 87% of Jewish Israelis said they were in favor of returning to fighting after the recent truce. In contrast, just around 20% of Arab Israelis who took the survey were in favor of keeping the fighting going. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant stated this week, "We cannot stop operating. To ensure the safety of Israel, our neighbors, and the entire globe, we must not pause." The Prime Minister made the announcement on Thursday as Israeli families prepared to celebrate Hanukkah by lighting the first candles. "Our soldiers are expanding the ground operation against Hamas throughout the Gaza Strip," he added. "We can reach any location." After marching from Tel Aviv, hostage families finally reached Mr. Netanyahu's office in Jerusalem on November 18 to demand that he do more to free their loved ones. Even though they are among the most defenseless people in the country, his relationship with them has been difficult. External demands for restraint are easier to dismiss than their demands to put the fate of their family members ahead of the flattening of Gaza. "I desire his removal more now than before." Many of the victims of that October days massacre belonged to left-wing kibbutzim that had previously been strongly opposed to Mr. Netanyahu's leadership. Ayelet Hakim, 55, a resident of Kibbutz Be'eri, expressed her desire for him to be removed even more strongly after the horrific slaughter of over 100 people on October 7. She and her husband and their 2 children, ages 4 and 11, hid in their safe room for 17 hours a day as their house was encircled by attackers. She urged her son, who was 29 years old at the time, to take care of himself in what she believed would be her final text messages. Hamas abducted her 57-year-old sister, Raz Ben Ami, though the rest of her family managed to escape. After being held for 54 days, she was recently released in the hostage exchange. However, Ohad Ben Ami, her husband, is one of the 137 hostages who are still held captive. After Raz was released, she wasted no time in spearheading a campaign to have her husband released as well. According to Ms. Hakim, the hostage families and Mr. Netanyahu were in a group meeting last Wednesday when she stormed out in protest of the government's inaction. Mr. Netanyahu should hand over the reins to someone else and allow them to deal with this, Ms. Hakim said from a hotel in Ein Bokek, a Dead Sea resort town where the Be'eri have been residing since the attack. Many of the kibbutzim residents who lost loved ones in the massacres committed by Hamas will support Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plan to completely alter the Gaza Strip once the hostages are released. The possibility of resorting to military force is something that Ms. Hakim has acknowledged. What she really meant was that she and the Palestinians were the same now and that they were both unsafe. My wish is that there will be no Hamas so that our lives can improve. She firmly believed that the terrorist group known as Hamas should be eradicated. I wish Hamas would disappear from the face of the earth so that the Palestinians in Gaza can live in safety, just as I wish to live in safety in Be'eri. Also residing in Be'eri, 45-year-old Miriam Gad Messika expressed her desire for a sense of security once the Israeli military will finish what it started, that we see the sea, the shore, alluding to the coastline along Gaza, which is currently obscured from her home due to the Strip. Perhaps Gaza won't exist in the future. There are numerous countries that are willing to welcome the Palestinians, she stated. Israel is so tiny that they can just leave if they don't want to coexist or be peaceful. Their presence is unnecessary. The 2 million Palestinians residing in Gaza, the majority of whom are battling for survival amidst brutal clashes between Israeli forces and Hamas terrorists, may be the ones who would desire Mr. Netanyahu to resign the most, since Israel's declaration of independence in 1948, which triggered the Arab-Israeli War and forced the displacement of 1 million people. According to them, Palestinian land has been illegally occupied for 75 years. Many Palestinians in Gaza today are discovering they are stranded with nowhere to seek refuge. According to the UN, about 80% of the population has been displaced as a result of the war.